This world is called Area. Swords, magic, and hordes of monsters that make it a constant struggle for survival. This world tends to draw aliens from other dimensions into its battle. At their first appearance, they find themselves in Xenovis, a city on the run. Lee Soo-min turned out to be just one of such aliens, as he confessed to the man who met him that he was not trained in magic or martial arts. In that case, the guy was asked to proceed to a local inn and explain everything on the way. The man assumed that the newcomer was thirsty and handed him a flask, but Min, taking just one sip, splashed the liquid in the guide's face, causing him incredible pain. The faint smell of the drink let Min know that it was not water, but paralyzing goblin poison. It looked like the man was going to trick the newcomer and sell him into slavery. The rogue now realized that he was not just some alien, but Min convinced him otherwise. He was a newcomer with 13 years of experience behind him. The man attacked him, but received a strong blow between his legs, and then the guy took out his own dagger and pierced the hapless crook, reminding the main rule of this lousy world: don't trust anyone. In any case, this guide had almost nothing with him, just a few $100,000 in local currency and a single dagger, though of course that was better than nothing. Except for his body. Min immediately groped around, but found no scars or muscles. For this reason, he concluded that he had indeed gone back 13 years. Before his return, Lee Soo-ming was a rank C mercenary. He had a standard poor life. His earnings were only enough to last until the next day. Without innate talents and noble origins, there was no way to get to the top. In an attempt to solve this problem, Min grabbed the last meager chance and found an uncharted dungeon. Finally, after exhausting battles, he found a chest that he opened with great hope, but inside was only stone. Min took it and carried it with him everywhere, and soon saw a warning about being transported 13 years back, which appeared just before his death. Now there was one last ray of hope in him, so he opened the status window, but it was exactly the same as the last time. Min found himself back in Area with no powers and no skills. In that case, it was a rather pointless return, although he had memorized a few things about this world during his 13 years of experience. Plus, he can take advantage of some out-of-class privileges. Various people from other dimensions come to Area. Among them, there are mages and martial artists, but most often there are so-called extra classes. These aliens can become whatever they want, and there is even the possibility for them to receive a special growth booster. While this sounds nice, in practice the outclassed are the bottom of the food chain. Since they have no abilities from the beginning, most die before they even have a chance to evolve. Soo-ming was like this: humiliation, poverty, constant struggle for survival, and an ignominious death at the end. In all these 13 years, he can't even remember a drop of joy, but now he will do anything to make his life better. After the enhancement, his skeleton appeared to have been improved to the level of a martial arts master skeleton. Ming now has two whole directions for growth. The skeleton can be improved for free, but the main requirement for this is to be outclassed with no powers or skills. Since this bone setter will die soon, there will be no more newcomers with this kind of improvement. The second opportunity for growth at this stage is the technique of celestial concentration, which is the accumulation of spiritual energy. In fact, there are a whole host of techniques for dealing with energy and the rapidity of its concentration. In his previous life, Min had managed to learn the ordinary second-level technique, and only later learned that an inconspicuous bookstore had a textbook on the first-level concentration technique. Since even the administrator himself was unaware of its true value, Min purchased it for a pittance, and then corrected the mistakes that had robbed him of a chance at a better life in the past. 2 of the 3 unique starting opportunities have already been utilized. The last one remains: winning the tournament at the Coliseum, which will take place exactly 1 year from now. Since it's an extracurricular competition, the requirements for competitors are low. Min had no doubts about his victory, but his first priority at the moment was to find a job, because he needed a place to live and something to eat. Min decided to choose an activity where he could hone his skills, so his attention was drawn to monster hunting. The guy went to the merchant to buy equipment and began to make a fool of himself, offering only 60,000 for all the selected items, although the owner of the tent asked for at least 300. In this case, Min gave a sad look and offered his clothes, explaining that they were made in a very technological world and would be worth much more than 300,000, but the merchant only laughed. Nevertheless, the man admitted that he respected those who were willing to do anything for survival and allowed him to take the goods in installments. The merchant wished her good luck, suggesting that they would see each other often, but asked her not to forget the 240,000 heirs debt. Min understood that even a light armor increases the chances of staying alive, so he didn't regret going into debt. The boy remembered the first time he came here to hunt in his previous life. That time he had been incredibly pathetic. Suddenly, there was a message about unlocking one of the abilities from his past life, Spirit Knocking Spear. Min rushed forward into the thickest part of the forest and threw his spear with force at the goblin that got in the way. Suddenly, he felt a pain in his hand, and when he turned his attention, he saw a burn on his palm. although it was normal in the first few times of using the skill. Of course, Min still didn't see the point of this return, but now he had a chance for a better life. At night, Min came to Jakajasi, bringing payment for the night's lodging. The latter noticed the boy's wallet, wondering where he had gotten it, for it cost at least $1.5 million, and Min explained that the merchant had agreed to discount it. Examining the goblin teeth and blood serums, Ajasi praised the lad's talent as he agreed to accept the loot from the hunt as payment for the night's lodging, hoping it wouldn't last long, since the out-of-class ones usually didn't last long, but it had been 2 weeks since Min had been bringing all these things back faithfully. The fatty laughed that with such talents, the guy could become as strong as Zeon, but the guy wasn't listening anymore, simply walking to his room. Min was incredibly angry. The word talented didn't fit him at all, because in his previous life, he had only been able to grow to a mercenary rank C. He looked at the status window, where several skills from his previous life had already been unlocked. However, he couldn't go far on second-level techniques. All his hopes were on a single level 1 technique, but even that didn't provide an endless supply of energy. Ming decided that he simply needed stronger martial arts techniques. The next day, Sung Min went hunting again, but suddenly Jack's daughter, the innkeeper's daughter, called out to him, asking him to stop, because she thought that his occupation would not end well. Lula explained that it would be better to look for an ordinary and safer job, for example, in their inn, because her father spoke favorably of the tenant, and, besides, learning the innkeeper's trade was not as dangerous as risking one's own skin every day in pursuit of another creature. Min smiled and simply walked on, remembering his past life as an opportunist who didn't even dare to contradict anyone. However, now he was determined to spend his life on something more valuable and achieve the success that had always made him envious. Suddenly, there was the sound of the noon bell, which signified the arrival of new strangers in the square. Min noticed a confused boy who seemed to be studying martial arts. The boy knew the local bandits would spot the newcomer by behavior, but those already held out a flask of paralyzing poison to the boy. Min decided it was none of his business and turned to leave, but he ran into a thug who immediately punched him in the face, screaming that his collarbone was broken. The big guy turned to his comrades who were drinking the newcomer right now, and Min realized that these assholes were from the same gang. It looked like he was having a lot of bad luck lately. Despite his modest striking power, this big guy was clearly a skilled fighter, so he assumed that he was facing a third-level martial practitioner. All martial artists are divided into 3 classes. Third-grade practitioners are the lowest and are attained in the shortest amount of time. Min realized that he wouldn't be able to deal with the boogeyman alone, and the locals were indifferent to the aliens' problems. Given that the newcomer looked like an alien from Urim, Min assumed he must be of some use, so he ordered him to drop the flask, explaining what it actually contained. The big man said that there would be buyers for the guy among the perverted nobility, and was about to grab the victim, but Min bounced back, and then delivered a few crushing blows with his techniques, forcing the crook to twist. However, he only laughed, and Min couldn't understand what was going on. This big guy was like he was made of stone. He must know some defense techniques. With a child's strength and weight, he would be impossible to defeat. One of the bandits who had been harassing the newcomer shouted that it was time to leave and tried to grab the newcomer. Meanwhile, Min pulled out his spear, as he realized that he couldn't beat the big guy with his fists. But suddenly the newcomer appeared next to him and asked him to repeat what he had said. Min asked to wait a bit, pointing at the big guy, but suddenly the newcomer swung his palm, and the big guy flew back. The young man watched in horror, wondering who it was. To knock out such a strong opponent with a single charge of spiritual energy is not second or even first class. This alien is a real master. The fact that he doesn't know anything about this world, possessing such abilities can only mean one thing. This guy is a minor heavenly demon Vichy Hoen, a celestial demon cult whose members revere strength and power. The strongest among them always becomes the leader and receives the title of heavenly demon. His offspring are called young leaders. It seems that this alien from Urim is such a young leader. He has master-level techniques and became a celebrity right after entering area. Naturally, in his previous life, Min couldn't have dreamed of such a thing. Now Min brought the new acquaintance to his place and found out that he was only a year younger. Hoen admitted that he was interested in what he had heard about this world, but he asked if there was really no heavenly demon cult here. Upon hearing the confirmation, Yen recalled that warning about the paralyzing poison in the square, and so indignantly asked how dare anyone address him as you, and Min explained that he didn't know who he was dealing with. He even bowed in deference, but Yen declared that he hadn't seen someone fight like that in a long time. The young leader called his interlocutor an inept, explaining that his moves and techniques were worthless, but promised to personally teach Min martial arts, but only on one condition: they would become friends. Even as a child, Hoen dreamed of having a friend, but his father always explained that this is the fate of mortals, and the boy will soon become the leader of hordes of demons, and the ruler does not need friends. Nevertheless, Vichy Hack had to answer in this way because he was very concerned about his son. Despite the fact that all sparring partners were amateurs, there were 50 of them, and the 10-year-old boy easily dealt with them. Hak thought his son was frighteningly strong, so he hoped that the lot would not fall to him. Su Ming knew that the heavenly cult heir was growing up under relentless supervision and had high expectations for him. His training started almost from diapers, and there was simply no time to make friends. Hence, the new acquaintance's suggestion was very surprising to Su Ming. In any case, Hoen kept his promise and began to teach his friend martial arts. The Way of the Violet Dawn was an art created by an unorthodox sect of demons. It got its name because of the color of the energy when it was performed. Of course, Min was grateful, but he was still puzzled as to why the heir had chosen this particular technique. After all, he had thought that Ing would teach him the heavenly demon arts, but he explained that only heavenly demons and their heirs could learn it. Since then, another month had passed. An incredible coincidence brought the guy together with Vichy Hoen, who was helping his friend to become stronger little by little. At the moment, Min is roughly in the middle between 2nd and 1st grade martial arts. Compared to his previous life, this is a huge accomplishment. After watching his ward fight, the heavenly demon heir was greatly disappointed by the latter's such inconsequential progress. Holding back his anger, Ming decided to simply collect the loot from the slain goblins as he suddenly saw a huge beast right in front of him, which was already swinging to strike. If he hadn't reacted in time, his head would have rolled away from his body, but he wondered where the orc had come from. After making sure that the enemy was alone, Min pierced it with his spear. Killing one orc was no problem for him, but he kept trying to figure out where this thing had come from. Suddenly, he was praised from behind for his excellent technique. Turning around, Min was perplexed to see a man who hurriedly introduced himself as Unhe Ryung, better known in the capital by the nickname Sword of Orchid. He confessed that there was some problem related to this orc. Du Sang Riang, nicknamed Monkey, questioned what they needed this dandy for, but He Ryung advised him not to look at his age, explaining that he had seen the kid's skill with his own eyes. Wang Pei said she trusted one's word, and Velas Renner asked the newcomer if he had any idea what kind of work he would be doing. The man explained that a tribe of orcs had recently set up camp near the city. These monsters have been attacking villages and travelers, so the mercenary guild has set a reward of 20 million ergs for the one who sends the entire band of orcs to the grave. Considering the potential spoils, it would come out to about 35 million, and it would have to be divided among 5 people. After doing the math, Min realized that he would get a pretty good reward, but there was only one question: whether he could trust a group of people he was seeing for the first time. In any case, the guy agreed, which pleased his new acquaintance, because the latter thought that together with such a technical warrior, this trip will be much easier. Suddenly Min noticed 2 big men with bags on their shoulders, who also seemed to be going to work, but He Ryung asked not to worry, explaining that they were simple porters, ready to go after the members of the squad at their first word. Finally, the man announced that it was time to depart. As they made their way through the forest, Min asked Monkey how many orcs would be in the camp, and he said 50, though he assumed that only 30 of them would have to be fought. He was also sure that it would be an easy job, for orcs are by nature stupid and clumsy creatures. All you have to do is catch them off guard and it's a cakewalk. An explained that they would have to split into 3 groups. He would go with a small warrior, and the others would make up the second squad. The plan was to lure the orcs out of the camp by splitting them up and then interrupt them. Lady Renner said that with the help of wind magic will make the smell of the team members spread throughout the forest, because more than anything else in the world orcs hate encroachment on their territory. That way those stupid monsters would fall into the first trap, and the others would be baited by launching a flare. After pondering for a while, Min concluded that the plan was okay, although a bit simplistic. In any case, there was no time to set any traps, and there weren't many people to do it with. Noticing a stake with a nailed skull marking the boundary of the orc territory, announced that it was time to split up and wished his companions good luck. The young man turned his attention to the porter who was pining from fatigue. They had been walking for half a day already, and for an ordinary out-of-class man this was an incredibly heavy load. Min warned the man that he would not be able to protect him from the orcs in case of danger, and therefore offered to run away now, but the porter refused, and Min himself knew how the guild dealt with fugitives. Suddenly, He Ryung reported that they had reached the place. He drew the little warrior's attention to the fence ahead. That was the orc camp. Un was about to launch a flare, but Min Jr.'s comrade asked him to wait, and then took out a tub of water from his oversized pouch, explaining that it should be mixed with the mud and slathered on to cover the smell. Suddenly, the orcs saw a pillar of light rushing upward. Suddenly, Un suggested that they deviate from the plan and send a porter forward to distract the orcs and give the warriors a chance to attack the enemies from the back. The big man objected that he would surely be killed. The warrior explained that he would do it himself if the porter disobeyed, though he then explained that he was just joking. In that case, Min asked permission to go first. Finally, the guy noticed a group of 13 heads moving in their direction, and so he stepped forward, nudging his spear. Soon the number of opponents was down to 12, and then to 11. Min was fully confident that he could take the entire group, though his head was now filled with thoughts of why he had taken pity on that poor porter. Showing mercy or even sympathy in Arya was tantamount to weakness. He realized that he didn't even know that man's name, but they were both out of class, and that was enough for him. The rule is that the strong rule. It is quite cruel and straightforward, but those are the laws this bloodthirsty world is famous for. Finally, Min decided to focus on the battle and remembered what the heavenly demon heir had taught him. Hoenn had always taught him to strike from a distance, and after using a few abilities, he swung his spear, striking several monsters at once, and then he entered the battle as well. Finally, there was only one orc left, who decided to finish off the porter, and had already thrown the poor man to the ground, but was pierced through and through by the young man's spear. Cutting out the orc's ears, threw them into a pouch to prove later how many monsters had been destroyed. When all 13 heads were done, the man tossed the pouch to the porter, ordering him not to lose anything, and invited the little warrior to check on his companions, who must have already done their part. Soon Monkey was already reporting back on the successful completion of the task, but suggested that the companions were having trouble considering how much dirt was on them, but unexplained that it was just part of the little warrior's cunning plan. Suddenly he declared that the real battle for the companions would only begin now, and in the next second Lady Reneur's chest was pierced by a throwing dagger, and the warrior himself brought his sword over Monkey's head, ordering the little warrior not to interfere. What he saw now made Min remember an incident from his past life, when he himself had been a part-time porter. One day, the square was crowded with people who were there to execute a dangerous criminal from Urim, who had gone to do the deed with his companions, and then killed them to take the bounty for himself. Now this same criminal was praising Min for his excellent reaction. In reality, the young man knew exactly what was going to happen, and even though it had been 13 years, the moment of execution seen for the first time was forever imprinted in his mind. In any case, gave the guy credit because he considered the latter a really good fighter, although he knew that he was much stronger himself. Min assumed that the martial artist in front of him was a martial artist of about second class. Despite the fact that he himself was only on the borderline of third and second, he was in no hurry to despair, as he was still able to read his opponent's movements perfectly. Min now assumed that the scoundrel was preparing for a chopping blow, and so he set up his spear just in time to stop Una. This caused the latter to laugh, for he was fully confident in his strength, when suddenly blood spurted from his mouth. Min explained that it was a poison he had slipped into the mud just before the orc camp. Although it was non-lethal since it didn't reach his stomach, the outlaw's hands still began to tremble, and thus he was unable to handle even a weaker opponent. The young man wondered what would do now, and suddenly he rushed to the side and straddled the poor carrier from the back, holding a knife to his throat, and promised the little warrior that he would kill the hostage if he took even one step forward. Was fully confident that this soft-hearted fool would not let the hostage die, but Min had been a mercenary for years, and therefore simply saw no reason to help a stranger by sacrificing his own interests. No one guarantees that the effect of the poison will not pass soon, and if Monkey cannot cope with the witch, then the fight will have to fight with two opponents. After the battle with the orcs, Min was already exhausted, so there was no choice. He began to approach Un. Suddenly the porter, having guessed the moment, brought the criminals to the ground with the whole weight of his huge body, but he still managed to pierce the hostage with his sword. After that one tried to appeal to the little warrior, but the latter did not want to hear anything and cut off the life of the villain with a sharp blow of the spear, and Monkey in turn dealt with Wang Pei, after which they went to the Guild of Mercenaries and divided all the proceeds for two. When they got home, Ming greeted his friend and tiredly lay down on the couch. He wondered if he could have saved the porter if he had a little more strength. He realized that he didn't want to do anything in this world that would make him feel remorse for the rest of his life. Suddenly Hoenn interrupted his thoughts, asking if his friend had killed people today, because he could smell blood, and Min had to confirm the assumption. However, this was not enough. The heir of the heavenly demon realized that his roommate was hiding something else, so he asked him to tell him what had happened. This assumption seemed a little strange to Min. He asked if his friend thought he couldn't handle a second-class fighter, but Yen countered that it was doable, given the Violet Dawn technique. The demon heir admitted to wandering around the city and noticing many things. It quickly came to his attention what life was like outside of class. Most of them were simply insignificant. Yen had noticed that humans had no trouble killing some insect, while killing a small animal required overcoming some sort of internal barrier, but the first thing Min did once he was in area was go into the forest to hunt. Many non-classmen realized that such a decision could save their lives but still hesitate, but on top of that, Min is also a teenager. All of this seemed illogical to Hoenn. The young man explained that he simply knows how to adapt, but in that case, the heir noticed another inconsistency. Min simply has no abilities, yet after only 3 weeks, he is already quite good with a spear. Ho Yen questioned his friend about who he really was and asked him not to lie. Min noted that true friends do not pry into each other's private lives, and then the demon heir offered to reveal one of his secrets in return, but Min refused. In that case, Yen offered to add some more powerful techniques on top, but the young man realized that he still didn't have the abilities and enough internal energy to fully master them. But Yen didn't back down and offered to still give a quarter of his own energy. The heavenly demon heir admitted to being very curious, and even more so, he didn't want there to be any secrets between him and his only friend. Finally, Yen warned that he would reveal his secret, and after unraveling his hair, he confessed that he was, in fact, a girl. Noticing the surprise on her friend's face, Yen explained that this was necessary to comply with the rules of the sect, for only a man could be the true heir, so her father had persuaded her to live as a boy. Now the girl reminded that it was also Min's turn to reveal his secret, but first he warned that tomorrow it would be necessary to separate into different rooms. At last, the young man confessed that he was a returnee. After listening to the whole story, Yen declared that she believed what she heard, although she didn't understand why. In any case, it explains everything, and besides, anything can happen in this area. Nevertheless, Min wondered if her friend was offended by the fact that she had been deceived about her real age, but Yun reminded her that she was the first to approach her and offer to be friends, so it would certainly not be a hindrance to their future relationship. By the way, the girl admitted that she feels sorry for how small the heights Min has reached in his life. Anyway, now, as promised, Yen was going to transfer a quarter of her inner energy to her friend. Chi energy is accumulated by martial artists for use in combat. It gives superpowers, and with the help of various concentration techniques, masters increase their energy potential. As a rule, they work on it all their lives, gradually increasing the potential over the years. This is the basis of a fighter's power, but energy transfer is quite rare. Yen noticed that her friend's vessels were very polluted, but it couldn't be helped. Learning martial arts at 14 was a bit late. Anyway, now everything was ready, and the girl touched her friend's body, and the process itself was accompanied by incredible pain for the latter. Su Ming couldn't believe it. Even though and had only transferred a quarter of it, he wouldn't have been able to accumulate so much energy in a lifetime. The heiress advised him to follow the path of the violet dawn, and then the rest of the energy would disperse evenly through the meridians. The young man still didn't understand why the girl did this, but Hoen asked not to worry, explaining that she just wanted to help her friend become stronger. She further promised to also teach the guy the technique of a spear king, the bearer of the great spear of the ninth heaven. Yen warned that with Su Ming's current abilities, it would be difficult to master this ability, so she promised to make it as primitive as possible, and reminded him that she was doing this for the only friend in her life, so she couldn't let him die at the age of 13 this time too. Min bowed in gratitude, but was immediately punched in the face, because Yen thought friends didn't bow to each other. Instead, she plopped him on the bed and suggested doing something more pleasant, like talking about his past life. The heiress asked him to tell her how Min remembered her back then, and he admitted that he had barely made ends meet back then, and only knew of the greatest warrior of all time from rumors floating around. Then the mysterious heir to the throne left town and was not heard from for 3 years. Yen assumed that she had simply traveled that time, for it was the freedom that she missed the most. The cult had a whole set of rules to follow, so she admitted that she was incredibly happy to be in this new world. The heiress said that she would leave again in about a month, as soon as she taught her friend the ninth heaven bearer technique, and asked how Min wanted to use this chance for a new life. All the humiliations and failures of the past immediately appeared in front of his eyes, so he explained that he just wanted to live a better life than then. Still, Yen asked him to think of a specific goal and tell her later. Suddenly, she remembered the original topic of conversation and asked Min again to tell something from his past life, though nothing much came to his mind. Still, it made him wonder if he had any friends in this city. Oddly enough, just as he himself is the first friend in Hoen's life, she is the same for him. That night was a really long night, and the guys had time to discuss a lot of things, and soon a month of training had passed, and So Yen had asked for a demonstration of what the young man had learned. Min realized that it was almost time for her to leave, and this training might be the last. He promised that he would fight at full strength, which amused the heiress, who wondered if the boy really thought that with his level of ability, he could fight with his sleeves up. Su Ming rushed forward, and Yen warned him that she was giving him a head start of no more than 20 moves. He immediately began to think about how best to utilize this advantage. Just before the training, the girl still managed to think of a way to adapt the technique of the ninth heaven spear bearer to a friend, combining it with the elements of the heartbreaking spear technique. So he decided to use it first. The girl easily dodged the attack, and So Min used the second movement, letting his mentor know that now he is much easier to give some combinations. The sparring continued, and Yen continued to count the moves, so as not to miss the moment of the end of the forfeit. Nevertheless, Min could not understand how strong this celestial demon heiress was. With the help of the techniques taught to him by Yen, the guy was able to rise to the second class of martial arts, but she still blocks blows with just one hand. The girl noticed the indecisiveness of her ward and even assumed that he was about to give up, but Min rushed forward with renewed vigor, and soon there was only one move left in his advantage. Finally, He threw another punch, but there was no counter-movement. Instead, Yen moved behind her student's back and put her hand to his throat, marking a loss, though the girl noticed how much better Min had become. Despite his very limited abilities, the boy's reaction left no doubt that he was simply born for martial arts. Ing expressed confidence that one day, he would push his skills to the point where they would give a significant edge over others. In that case, the heavenly demon heiress expressed her confidence that they would still meet in 10 years from now. Speaking of which, Yen recalled her question about the young man's goal that night a month ago, and since he hadn't decided anything, she offered to become his goal herself. The girl was sure that every person needed a goal in life, so she suggested that she set her goal to defeat her in 10 years. Suddenly, Min desperately shouted that he would never be able to defeat her because Yen had innate talent. Plus, she probably had access to elixirs, so she had no idea what it was like to be a nobody. Yen confessed that she was already disgusted by the young man's self-defeating behavior, and in general, it was a trait that she just couldn't stand in her friend. She remarked that Min was always grasping at the failures of his past that were dragging him down, but he merely countered that he had been summoned to area naked as a falcon. He recalled that he had spent his entire past life on the edge of survival, in poverty. Yen countered that this time, Min had trained with a martial arts master and had become a second-class fighter in just 3 months. Instead of grasping for a second chance, he keeps listening to his sense of inferiority acquired in his past life, but Min ordered him to shut up, being beyond furious and lectured by some teenager. Since she was so eager for it, he declared that he would really live with one goal, to plunge a spear straight into the girl's heart after 10 years. But she objected that she would die in that case, and therefore suggested that it was just a friendly duel. Now Li Su-ming had set 3 goals for himself. The first was to survive, the second was to become stronger, and finally, the third was Vichy Hoen, whom he had said goodbye to for 10 whole years. So, Li Su-min had 3 chances that he shouldn't miss out on for anything: the skeletal enhancement surgery, the heavenly concentration technique, and the last one, the battle tournament for the outclassmen. It had already been 10 months since Hoen had left. During this time, Min had advanced to the first grade of martial arts, so it was easy for him to win. There were simply no worthy opponents among the outclassmen. The reward was an elixir of power that increased the potential of chi energy. Ming accepted the elixir immediately, so it was an important help, even though Hoen had given it to him. Now he had gotten everything he wanted from this city, so there was only one thing left. The arms dealer Hans Ajasi had already heard about the young man's victory in the tournament and congratulated him on it, but Min said he had come to say goodbye. This was not a revelation to the man, so he wished him good luck, but warned him that the outside world was even more dangerous than Xanavi's. As a parting gift, Hans gave him an oversized pouch, not a new one, but 1.5 times larger than the previous one. After saying goodbye to the merchant, Min looked into the tavern, and the owner's daughter immediately realized that he was going to leave the city, given that he had cleaned the room himself for the first time in his life. Of course, the girl had heard that aliens left the city sooner or later, but when she heard the confirmation of her guess, she wished the former guest to die a horrible death somewhere in the wilderness, and then left the establishment in a rage. Jack asked Min to ignore it, referring to his daughter's youth, and gave him a parting gift in the form of his own cloak, which he had worn as a warrior. The cloak was a bit small and a bit too big, but it contained magic to help in sword fights. Jack admitted that Min was the most capable out-of-class boy he'd ever seen, so he wished him to take care of himself and even let out a tear. Min was already in the square when a panting Lula suddenly ran up from behind and apologized for wishing him dead. The girl asked him to take care of himself and, if anything, to come back to her in the city. She confessed that she had once looked at Min from a different angle and even felt as if she liked him, though he had noticed it himself. Lastly, Lula asked him to just not die. In his previous life, it had taken Min a full 3 years to leave Xanavi's. In this one, it took less than a year. Strangely enough, he didn't have any good memories from his previous life, but in this one, he had received the necessary goodness. Su even began to think about coming here again someday. He was soon greeted by the MT Mersher community, whose adept admitted that he had not seen such young adepts in a long time. He inquired as to what kind of ban the child wished to place on himself. Min remembered well his friend's request to not die, only that he would have to become stronger to do so. Since Hoen didn't know the geography of this world at all, she suggested that Min himself choose the place where they would meet in 10 years, and then he chose Bichenger. There were still 9 whole years until the conditional meeting, so it was necessary to decide where to head now. For a second, Min thought about becoming a mercenary, but then this life would be just like the last one. Since he needed to hone his skills now, he chose Mersher Mountain. Mersher is the Aryan god of hardship and trials. Through the congregation of his priests, one can cast a restraining spell on a part of the body or one of the senses. This allows a person to increase the effectiveness of their training by 100-fold. In addition, this mountain was relatively close by. Thus, Min found himself on Mersher, received a ban from one of the priests and decided to train. In fact, there were actually two bans placed on him. The first is the ban of lightness. It makes Min feel unusually heavy in everything. His gear, his sizeless pouch, even his bread is heavier. The second ban is the most disgusting of all, the ban on taste. It's not even the loss of taste per se, it's the prohibition to taste good. Everything Min doesn't eat seems disgusting and nauseating. Even the very texture of the food itself changes. For example, instead of the usual bread, he felt like eating live slugs and they were releasing juice. Min even wondered if it would all go to hell. Come to think of it, he didn't need to work so hard. He could just go to Behanger and become a mercenary. At that rate, he'd grow to a B class. At any rate, it would still be better than in his previous life. But the young man immediately threw away these bad thoughts, for he knew that he must try, and so he ate a huge piece of bread and drank it generously with water, though he spat most of it out. In this way, a week passed. Min went out hunting, but at the decisive moment he did not have the strength even to hit a deer with his spear. All this time he had only bread and water to eat. On Mount Mercer you have to survive with the inhibitions imposed, find shelter from the rain, sew your own clothes and get food. This too is part of the challenge. The temperature at night is much lower than during the day, and the predators are fast and strong. The ban on lightness makes any movement incredibly heavy and clumsy, but even if the hunt ends successfully, the ban on taste prevents one from fully savoring the prey. As a result, in a week, Min's body has weakened considerably, and after all, he was going to train on the mountain for at least 2 years. However, now the young man does not see much point in it, as his own body fails him more and more. Suddenly, he noticed a stranger ahead of him, but he didn't bother, as it was forbidden for those training on Mercer to harm each other. He asked who she was, but the girl gestured that she couldn't speak, leading Min to conclude that she was under a speech ban. Suddenly, she threw the carcass of the very same deer in his direction. The young man tried to explain his difficult situation regarding the taste, but the stranger came closer and wrote that she had been watching Min for a week. At this rate, he would simply starve to death. In that case, he thanked the stranger and asked what she wanted, but the girl explained that she was just helping out of the goodness of her heart. So, Su-ming met a mysterious huntress who helped him every time he got into trouble. By the way, he asked what her name was, and the answer surprised Su-ming a bit. He had heard the name Baek-sogo before in his previous life. It meant lightning, so the girl was nicknamed because of her incredible speed. However, what surprised Min was not even the fact of meeting the celebrities. The fact is that Baek-sogo is going to die soon. It would happen in 9 years, and the killer would be the heavenly demon Vichy Ho-young. Min couldn't remember where exactly it would happen, when suddenly Beck crept up unnoticed and scratched a welcoming inscription on the rock. The young man wondered why she didn't use telepathy, since her level allowed her to do so, and soon learned that telepathy was also part of the speech ban. Min also noticed the girl's left hand, and Beck explained that it was another ban. He then asked if Lightning knew what bans the other adepts had placed on themselves, at which point she promised to introduce the lad to them, asking him to follow her. Suddenly the girl snapped out of her seat and raced away, but after a moment she was back again, remembering her new acquaintance's injunction against lightness, though Min realized he wouldn't have kept up with her under normal circumstances either. Beck explained that right now it was better for the lad to concentrate on honing his movements rather than his spear skills. In that case, Min asked his friend to give him a couple lessons, but she objected that she couldn't share what gave her an advantage in battle. Suddenly, Lightning hoisted the young man onto her shoulder, informing him that she would carry him so as not to waste any time. Upon arrival, Min smelled a strong stench, but quickly realized what was wrong when he was introduced to Scarlet Lazur with prohibitions to wash and change clothes. Next to her sat a scarred old man named Dakbai Jun with sight bands on his right and left eyes. Lightning explained that after 6 months of testing, there were only 4 adepts left on the mountain. Min looked at them, eyes wide with surprise, as he already knew that these people would become great masters in the future. For now, they were little known, but their fame would soon spread throughout area. Scarlet noticed that the boy already had 2 bands, even though he'd only been here for about 2 weeks. She assumed that Min wouldn't last long on the mountain, but Dakbai explained that they came here to gain power, so she shouldn't be surprised that the boy had voluntarily made life difficult for himself. Min noticed that the old man could get creepy out of the blue, and Dakbai warned that all sorts of people gathered on this mountain. He recalled how many adepts had failed in 6 months, but promised to keep an eye on the young man. Scarlet assumed that Lightning was rejoicing now, because now she wasn't the only weirdo who had taken 2 bands from the beginning. Since the newcomer had met the rest of the adepts, Beck offered to go back, but Min noted that they were talking about the 4 remaining adepts, and there were only 3 here. The adepts looked at each other perplexedly, but Dakbai found the strength to warn the boy against meeting Flam, for he was very dangerous. Thus passed another 4 months of training on Mount Mercer. Once Min got used to the prohibitions, they became worse. The body felt even heavier, and the taste of food and water disgusting. However, Min also felt himself getting stronger. In these 4 months, he had managed to pump the path of the Violet Dawn to 3 stars. Although the skeletal enhancement operation was rather low-grade, it had greatly accelerated the young man's growth in martial arts. Of course, life on Mershire was incredibly difficult, but now Ming realized that the rewards were worth the effort. During the day, he used the adapted technique of wielding the spear-bearer of the ninth heaven, and at night, he used the way of the Violet Dawn. The inordinate heaviness of movement along with the nauseating taste of provisions never leaves him for a second, but every such second of being on Mershire has been fruitful. Every step Min takes feels as if his bones are about to shatter, and every swing of his spear feels as if it is tearing his muscles, but Su was determined to endure all the trials of this mountain because he had set himself such a goal. By the way, during this time, Min had grown so tall that his clothes became tight, but one day another adept noticed his masterful handling of the spear. Flam introduced himself and admitted that it was the first time he had seen a peer here, so he asked for his comrade's name. Li Su-min was going through his new friend's questions about whether he had ever met a true genius. While the others are working hard and on the verge of despair as they continue to fight against themselves, he is advancing towards his goal at a breakneck pace, looking at the others with an arrogant smirk. Such is the extent of his gifts, and so the adepts remaining on the mountain warned the newcomer against meeting Flam, for it threatens despair. Noticing the tension in the air, Flam assumed that the others had already told them about him, so he even asked the newcomer with some resentment why he had not come to say hello, since he needed a peer friend. Min apologized and hurriedly left, referring to training, although in his heart he did not understand how the other adepts saw genius in this simpleton, on whom Su himself preferred not to waste time. Flam asked how the new acquaintance was training, and the latter scornfully pointed to the spear in his hands, which, however, unnoticed by Min, was already in the hands of his interlocutor. It was the greatest humiliation for a warrior to be deprived of his weapon, but instead of rage, surprise took over. Flam wondered what had made the newcomer's eyes bulge, for he had just borrowed the spear, promising to return it as soon as he had tried it out. After a short thought, Flam made a few swings of his weapon, bringing down several dozen trees in the area, but it was not even his strength that made Min marvel even more. The new acquaintance not only repeated his own techniques exactly, but also improved them. The talented young man admitted that he could not understand why the other adepts continued to train here, because he could not only copy their skills and techniques, but also make them better. He asked his new acquaintance if he knew why the others couldn't be like Flam. He had asked the remaining trio this question as well, but each time they just got angry and asked the know-it-all to stay away. To Ming himself, even now the other adepts are examples of true excellence, but this guy simply outshines them all. In fact, he had given a lot of thought to how an ordinary person should treat these kinds of geniuses. Su noticed that he felt completely different next to Flam than he did with Hoenn. Although she talked about her genius openly, she never belittled her only friend with her superiority. This asshole, on the other hand, is well aware of how ordinary people perceive his abilities and just revels in it. Flam asked what prohibitions Min had placed on himself and even promised to tell him about his own, but the young man was not interested in that, so he just continued on his way, but Flam did not stop pushing and reminded him about the spear. Min shouted that he didn't need it and asked the insolent man to stay away from him, though he pretended not to understand why his interlocutor was reacting so aggressively. Flam advised the boy to go down the mountain, assuming that with such skills Min would somehow manage to make ends meet. This made him so angry that he tried to hit Flam, forgetting the prohibition against harming other adepts. In response, the arrogant man firmly grabbed Li Su's arm and handed the spear back, suggesting that it was very hard to live when you had to hide your anger from a stronger opponent. Beck suddenly appeared from behind, but Flam asked her not to look at her with such judgment, explaining that he just wanted to return the weapon to its owner. Flam remarked that the spear technique Min was practicing was incredibly good, except that he himself performed it sloppily. He explained that the more difficult a challenge an adept puts on his shoulders, the more valuable the gifts of the goddess Mershire will be. In other words, the harder you make your stay on the mountain, the faster you will reach perfection. Finally, he concluded, more inhibitions were necessary for faster pumping. Suddenly Beck gagged Flam to keep the newcomer safe, but it was too late and he ran away. The words of the arrogant but very talented adept did not leave the young man's head, and therefore at one point he stopped and began to beg the goddess of tests for bans. You want part 2? Write the secret word in the comments. Ban. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and put a like, because the fast release of new parts depends on it. See you soon and bye-bye.